The kitchen light was the only light on in the entire Atherton estate. Every chandelier in every hallway was off. Every lamp in every sitting room was dark. The security cameras blinked their small red dots in silence. The gardeners had gone home hours ago. The chef had locked up the pantry and left before 9. The 2 other housekeepers who worked the day rotation were asleep in their off-site apartment somewhere in Menlo Park. The mansion, all 14,000 square feet of it, sat heavy and still on its hillside perch in one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. But the kitchen light was on. And Florence was dancing. She had her earbuds in. Her phone was propped against the spice rack on the marble counter, playing a slow R&B track, something with bass that hummed low and warm like a heartbeat. She was barefoot on the cold tile. Her coils were pulled up into a messy bun on top of her head. She wore her oversized staff t-shirt, the one that hung past her thighs, and a pair of cotton shorts underneath. No makeup, no pretense, no audience. She was not performing. This was not choreography. This was the kind of dancing a person does when they believe with absolute certainty that no one on earth is watching. Eyes closed, shoulders rolling. Her fingertips trailed across the countertop like it was the edge of a stage she used to stand on. She mouthed the lyrics. She swayed. She spun once, then twice, and the hem of her shirt billowed around her like she was underwater. Her bare feet made soft sounds on the marble, and her body moved like the music lived somewhere deep inside her bones, and was just now finding its way out. She was free. She did not know that Minho was standing 6 feet behind her in the dark hallway, watching every single movement. He was not supposed to be home. His private flight from a business summit in Scottsdale was not scheduled to land until the following morning, but the meetings ended early. The Gulfstream touched down at a private airfield south of San Francisco just before 11. He came in through the side entrance of the estate because he always used the side entrance. He preferred to enter his own home without announcement. He preferred silence, control, invisibility. He heard the music first, faint, leaking from earbuds that were turned up too loud. Then he saw the light spilling from the kitchen doorway into the hallway. He walked toward it the way a person walks toward something they do not understand. Quietly, carefully. And then he saw her. Minho was 32 years old. He was the sole heir and acting head of the Yoon family empire, a dynasty built across 3 decades on commercial real estate holdings, tech acquisitions, and private equity portfolios that stretched from Silicon Valley to Manhattan. The business press called him the silent king of Silicon Valley because he almost never spoke publicly, declined every interview request, and had a reputation for controlling entire rooms full of powerful people without ever raising his voice above a conversational tone. He was tall, sharp-jawed. Black hair pushed back off his forehead with the kind of effortless precision that probably took more effort than he would admit. His eyes were dark and steady and gave absolutely nothing away. He stood in the hallway in his travel clothes, a dark cashmere pullover and black trousers, and he watched his maid dance alone in his kitchen at midnight. He did not move. He did not speak. He just watched. Something was happening behind his eyes, something shifting like tectonic plates deep underground. He did not understand it. He did not like it, but he could not look away. Florence spun again. Her hand floated through the air. Her lips moved around lyrics he could not hear, and then the song must have changed because her rhythm shifted. Slower now, heavier. She was not just dancing anymore. She was feeling something. Her face changed. Her brow creased. She brought her hand to her chest like she was holding something there, something invisible and heavy, and she swayed with it, carried it, danced with the weight of it. Then she opened her eyes. She saw him. The scream that came out of her mouth was sharp enough to cut glass. Her phone clattered off the counter and hit the marble floor. The music stopped. She stumbled backward, her lower back slamming against the counter edge, and she gripped it with both hands. Her chest heaved. Her eyes were wide and wild with panic. Minho did not flinch. He did not step forward. He did not apologize for startling her. He stood completely still in the doorway, and for a long, unbearable moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said one sentence. His voice was so low it barely traveled across the kitchen. "You dance like someone who has lost something." Florence stared at him. Her heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She had worked in this house for 5 weeks. 5 weeks of cleaning rooms she could never afford to sleep in, polishing surfaces that reflected a life that would never be hers. In all that time, she had spoken to Minho exactly once. The day she was hired. He had looked at her for 3 seconds, said, "Don't touch anything in my office," and walked away. That was it. That was the entirety of their relationship. Now he was standing in the dark doorway of his own kitchen, looking at her with those unreadable eyes, and saying something that reached into her chest and grabbed hold of something she had spent months trying to bury. She did not answer. She bent down, snatched her phone off the floor, mumbled something that might have been an apology, and rushed past him out of the kitchen. As she passed, close enough to feel the warmth coming off his body, she caught a scent. Cedar and something expensive she could not name. Something that did not belong in the same sentence as her life. She practically ran down the hallway toward the staff quarters. Min-ho stood alone in the kitchen. He looked at the spot on the marble where she had been standing. He looked at the spice rack where her phone had been propped. He stood there for a long time, longer than made any kind of rational sense, and then he pulled out his phone. He called Mrs. Cho, his head of household staff, a sharp-tongued Korean woman in her late 50s who had managed the estate for 11 years and who answered her phone at any hour without complaint. "The new maid," Min-ho said. "Florence, tell me everything about her." Here was what Mrs. Cho's file said, and what Min-ho would learn within the next 12 hours. Florence Adami was 26 years old, born in Detroit, Michigan, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a hospital laundry service. She grew up singing in church, then in school talent shows, then in open mic nights at small venues around Detroit. By 23, she had built a growing following online. Her YouTube videos, just her and a microphone in her bedroom, had tens of thousands of views. People shared her covers and original songs with captions like, "Why is nobody talking about this girl?" and "She's going to be famous, remember this post." A mid-level record label in Los Angeles had started showing interest. Everything was moving. Everything was building. Then a man named Terrence Whitaker happened. He called himself a manager. He inserted himself into her life with promises and contracts and industry connections that turned out to be mostly fiction. Over the course of 6 months, he gained access to her savings, her demo recordings, and her trust. Then he vanished. He took $14,000. He took every master recording she had ever made. He took her contacts, her momentum, and the fragile, hard-won confidence she had spent years building. Florence was left with nothing. No money, no music, no proof that any of it had ever existed. She could not afford a lawyer. She could not afford rent. She moved to California 8 months ago because California felt far enough away from Detroit to count as starting over. She found the job listing for a live-in housekeeper at a private estate in Atherton. It came with a room, 3 meals a day, and a steady paycheck. She applied. She got hired. She told herself she was done with music. Done performing. Done dreaming. But every night, when the house went dark and the world forgot she existed, Florence danced alone in the kitchen. Because her body would not let her stop. Because the music was still inside her, even if she pretended it was not. And now Min-ho knew. Now here is what I need to know from you. If you walked into a room and saw someone dancing like that, like they were carrying the entire weight of a dream they gave up, would you walk away or would you stand there and watch? Tell me in the comments and do well to like the video. Now let's continue. Florence woke up the next morning with a knot in her stomach so tight she could barely eat breakfast. She sat on the edge of her small bed in the staff quarters, a clean but modest room at the far end of the estate's east wing, and replayed the moment over and over. Him standing in the dark. Those eyes that gave nothing away. That sentence. You dance like someone who has lost something. She covered her face with her hands and groaned into her palms. She was going to be fired. She was certain of it. Dancing barefoot in the boss's kitchen in the middle of the night like some kind of unhinged person. Using his Bluetooth-connected speaker system, in her pajamas. She was absolutely going to be fired. She got dressed. She put on her uniform. She reported to Mrs. Cho at 7 sharp, bracing herself for the worst. Mrs. Cho looked up from her tablet, said West Wing and Library today, and looked back down. That was it. No reprimand, no sideways look, no Mr. Yoon would like to speak with you. Nothing. The day unfolded like every other day. Florence cleaned the West Wing bedrooms, all 5 of them, none of which had been slept in because Min-ho lived alone and apparently used approximately 10% of his own house. She dusted the library shelves. She vacuumed the second-floor hallway. She avoided the kitchen like it was a crime scene. She did not see Min-ho once. but Minho saw her. He was in his home office on the second floor, a room with dark wood paneling and 3 monitors on his desk, on a conference call with a group of investors in Manhattan. They were discussing the acquisition of a commercial real estate portfolio that included properties in Palo Alto and Bellevue, Washington. It was worth north of $200 million. It required Minho's full attention. Minho was not giving it his full attention. His chief financial officer, a sharp Korean-American man named James, was on the call from his own office in San Francisco. James had worked with Minho for 6 years. He knew Minho's rhythms the way a musician knows time signatures, and he could tell even through a screen that something was off. Minho's responses were a half-beat slower than usual. His eyes drifted. He ended the call 10 minutes early, which in 6 years of working together had never happened. Not once. After the call, Minho sat at his desk and opened his laptop browser. He typed Florence Adami into the search bar. He found her old YouTube channel, 14 videos. The most recent one was 9 months old. He found her Instagram, inactive since the same time. He found a small article from a Detroit arts blog that had featured her in a local artists to watch column 2 years ago. Then he pressed play on one of her YouTube videos. It was filmed in what looked like a bedroom, cheap curtains in the background, a ring light that cast slightly uneven light across her face. She sat on a stool with a microphone on a simple stand in front of her. She wore a plain white t-shirt. No production, no effects, just her. She sang. And Minho, a man who had sat across negotiation tables from some of the most powerful people in America without flinching, felt his hand freeze halfway to his coffee cup. Her voice was extraordinary, not just good, not just technically skilled. It had a texture to it, a rawness, a depth that made the air in the room feel different. She sang a neo-soul ballad, something about leaving home and trying to find a version of yourself that the world had not touched yet. Her eyes closed as she sang. Her body swayed slightly. It was the same thing he had seen in the kitchen. The music was inside her. It was part of her biology. He watched 3 more videos, then 4 more, then all 14. He read the comments, hundreds of them. Where did you go? Please come back. I've been checking this channel every week for months. Are you okay? This girl has the most slept-on voice on the entire internet. Someone sign her before I lose my mind. Then the videos stopped, 9 months ago, like someone had reached into her life and pulled the plug. Minho closed the laptop. He sat very still in his chair for a long time. That evening, Florence was setting the formal dining table. Minho always ate in his office. Always. In 5 weeks, she had never once set the dining table for actual use. But Mrs. Cho had told her to set it tonight, so she set it. She was placing the last piece of silverware when Minho walked in. He sat down, at the dining table, alone, like it was something he did every night, even though they both knew it was not. Florence served the meal. Her hands were steady, but her pulse was not. She set the plate down carefully. She poured water into his glass. She did everything exactly as she had been trained to do. Professional, invisible, background. She turned to leave. You stopped singing 9 months ago. Florence froze mid-step. Her back was to him. Why? It was not a question the way most people ask questions. There was no upward inflection, no curiosity in his tone. He said it like a fact that was missing its other half, like an equation with a blank space where the answer should be. Florence stood very still. She could feel his eyes on her back. She did not turn around. That's none of your business, Mr. Yoon. She walked out of the dining room. Her heart was slamming against her ribs so hard she was surprised he could not hear it. Minho watched her leave. He picked up his fork. He set it back down. He looked at the doorway she had disappeared through. In 32 years of life, across boardrooms and deal tables and private meetings with governors and tech moguls, and people who shaped the American economy, almost no one had told Minho that something was none of his business. People answered his questions. People gave him what he wanted. That was how the world worked when you were Minho. Florence Adami, his maid, had just set a boundary with him and walked away without looking back. He leaned back in his chair, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but close. Meanwhile, 6 hours south in Beverly Hills, Minho's mother was already making plans. Seo-yoon was 61 years old, and lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city like a throne overlooking a kingdom. She was elegant in the way that certain Korean women of immense wealth are elegant, every detail controlled, every surface polished, every emotion filed away behind perfect posture and designer clothes. She had been the architect of the Yoon family's social positioning for 3 decades. She had managed her late husband's public image. She had cultivated relationships with every powerful Korean family on the West Coast, and she had exactly one remaining project that she considered unfinished. Her son's marriage. Min-ho was 32, unmarried, unattached as far as she knew. She had been arranging introductions for 2 years, daughters of shipping magnates, granddaughters of soul-banking families who had relocated to the States, women with degrees from Stanford and Wharton who came from bloodlines that would strengthen the Yoon name. Min-ho had declined every single one. Seo-yoon was patient, but patience, like everything else in her life, had a limit. Over the next week, something subtle shifted inside the Atherton estate. It was not dramatic, it was not obvious, but Florence felt it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Min-ho started appearing. Not in meetings, not on phone calls behind closed doors. He started appearing in the physical spaces of the house in ways he never had before. She would be polishing the glass railing on the second-floor landing, and he would walk past slowly, heading nowhere in particular. She would be restocking the linen closet near the garden terrace, and he would be standing outside on the terrace, looking at his phone but not really looking at his phone. She would be wiping down the kitchen island, and he would walk in to get water, pour it slowly, and leave without saying a word. He never spoke to her during these appearances. He did not need to. His presence was the message. He was orbiting her, quietly, deliberately, like a planet adjusting its trajectory and pretending it had always been on this path. Florence noticed. Of course she noticed. She noticed the way he moved, unhurried and precise, like every step he took was calculated. She noticed that he smelled like cedar every single time he passed. She noticed that his hands were always still, never fidgeting, never restless. She noticed things she had no business noticing about a man who signed her paychecks. It made her nervous. It confused her. It made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in a very long time, and that terrified her more than anything. Then came the dinner. Min-ho hosted a private gathering at the estate for a group of tech investors and venture capitalists. It was not a party. It was a high-stakes business dinner designed to finalize terms on the acquisition of a major commercial real estate portfolio across Palo Alto and Bellevue. The guests were powerful men and women in dark suits and designer dresses. They drank expensive wine. They laughed the way wealthy people laugh, controlled, performative, aware of who was listening. Florence was part of the serving staff that evening, along with 2 other temporary workers Mrs. Cho had brought in for the event. She wore her black service uniform. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She moved through the room the way she had been trained, invisible, efficient, present but unseen. She was clearing a set of appetizer plates from a side table when a hand closed around her forearm. She looked down, then up. The hand belonged to a man named Craig Whitfield, American, mid-50s, red-faced from wine. He was a real estate investor from Scottsdale who had been trying to get a seat at Min-ho's table for over a year. He had finally been invited, and he was celebrating by drinking too much and talking too loud. He did not let go of her arm. "Hey, sweetheart," he said. His words were slightly slurred. "You should smile more. The help around here is a lot prettier than it used to be." Florence felt the words land on her skin like something dirty. She knew this feeling. She had felt it before in other jobs, in other rooms, in other moments where men with power treated women without power like decorations. She did what she had always done. She kept her face neutral. She gently pulled her arm free. She said, "Excuse me," in a voice that gave nothing away, and she kept moving. The room did not notice. The conversation continued. But across the room, standing near the fireplace with a glass of water he had not touched, Min-ho noticed. He had seen Craig's hand close around Florence's forearm. He had seen the way her body went rigid. He had seen her face tighten and then smooth over as she forced herself into professional blankness. He had seen all of it. He set his glass down on the mantel. He excused himself from a conversation mid-sentence. The 2 people he had been speaking with looked confused. Min-ho never left conversations mid-sentence. Minho never left anything mid-anything. He walked across the room. The crowd parted without realizing they were parting. People moved out of Minho's path instinctively, the same way animals move away from something that is calm but dangerous. He reached Craig Whitfield. He leaned down. His mouth was close to Craig's ear. He spoke quietly enough that no one else in the room could hear what he said. Craig Whitfield's face went white. Not pink, not pale, white, like the blood had been vacuumed out of his head in a single second. Craig stood up. He did not make eye contact with anyone. He mumbled something about an early flight. He collected his jacket from the back of his chair, and he left the dinner. The room adjusted. Conversations resumed. Nobody asked questions because nobody wanted to ask questions when Minho was involved. The next day, through staff gossip that traveled faster than Wi-Fi, Florence learned that Craig Whitfield's firm had been quietly and permanently cut out of the acquisition deal. A $40 million opportunity, gone, erased like it had never existed, because of what he did at that dinner. Because of what he did to her. Florence found Minho in the garden that afternoon. He was standing near the stone fountain, looking at his phone. She walked up to him, which was something she had never done before, approaching him voluntarily, and she said what she needed to say. "You didn't have to do that." He looked up. "Do what?" "Cut him out of the deal. Because of what happened, because of me." Minho's expression did not change, not one muscle. "I cut him out because he is a liability and his firm's due diligence was substandard. It had nothing to do with you." They stood there, two people in a garden in Atherton, California, looking at each other across a distance that was not measured in feet. They both knew he was lying. Florence nodded slowly. She turned and walked back toward the house. She did not say thank you. She did not need to. The fact that she had come to find him at all said more than words could. That night, Florence lay in her small staff bedroom staring at the ceiling. She did not go to the kitchen. She did not dance, but she did something she had not done in months. She hummed. Softly, almost without meaning to. A melody she had never hummed before. Something new. Something that was forming in the space between what she had lost and what she was too afraid to want. Florence's past did not knock before entering. It kicked the door down. It was a Tuesday morning. She was on her break, sitting in the staff area with a cup of tea and her phone, when a call came in from Detroit. The name on the screen was Rochelle Martin, her oldest friend, the one person from her old life she still spoke to regularly. Rochelle was not calling to catch up. "Flo, I need you to sit down." "I'm sitting." "Terrence is using your music." The tea in Florence's hand went cold, not literally, but she stopped feeling its warmth. Rochelle explained. She had been scrolling through a music blog that covered independent R&B artists, and she had stumbled across a track listing for a new artist being shopped to labels in Atlanta. The artist's name was unfamiliar, but one of the song titles was not. It was called Glass Water. Florence had written that song at 2 in the morning in her Detroit apartment 3 years ago. She had recorded it in a home studio setup that cost her $400 to build. She had sung it with her eyes closed and tears running down her face, because the lyrics were about her mother working night shifts and coming home with cracked hands. That song was hers, and Terrence Whitaker was selling it under someone else's name. Rochelle kept talking. She said she had dug deeper and found 2 more songs, both Florence's, both listed under the fake artist, both being pitched to a small label in Atlanta as original work. Terrence had taken Florence's demo recordings, re-recorded them with a different singer, and was shopping them like they had never belonged to anyone else. Florence hung up the phone. She sat very still. She did not cry, not yet. The tears came later, during her afternoon shift. She was in the pantry restocking supplies when it hit her. Not just the theft, the memory. Hearing Rochelle say the title of that song had unlocked something Florence had spent months sealing shut. She remembered writing it. She remembered singing it. She remembered what it felt like to believe that her voice mattered, that her music could reach people, that she was building something real. And then she remembered what it felt like to have all of that taken away by someone she trusted. She sat down on the pantry floor. She pulled her knees to her chest, and she cried, silently, no sound, just tears running down her face and her shoulders shaking and her teeth clenched so tight her jaw ached. She cried the way people cry when they have practiced being invisible for so long that even their grief knows how to be quiet. The pantry door opened. Minho stood in the doorway. He had been looking for a specific tea that Mrs. Cho kept on the upper shelf. He had not expected to find his maid sitting on the floor with tears streaming down her face. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not say, "Are you okay?" which is a question people ask when they do not actually want to hear the answer. He stepped into the pantry. He closed the door behind him, and he sat down on the floor across from her, his back against the opposite shelf. His legs stretched out in front of him. His suit probably cost more than everything Florence owned combined, and he sat on a pantry floor in it without hesitation. He did not speak, he did not reach for her, he just sat there, present, silent like an anchor. Florence cried until she could not cry anymore. It took a while. When she finally looked up, her eyes swollen and red, her face streaked and raw, he was still there, still sitting, still watching her with those steady, unreadable eyes. "Whatever it is," he said quietly, "you do not have to carry it alone, not in this house." Something about the way he said it, not as a command, not as a platitude, but as a simple statement of fact, broke something loose in Florence. She told him, all of it, Terrence, the money, the stolen Demos, the forged contracts, how she had come to California to start over and had ended up hiding instead, how she cleaned his bathrooms and made his bed and polished his floors every day. And every day, she felt the distance between who she was and who she used to be getting wider. Minho listened without interrupting. His face did not change. His body did not move. He absorbed her story the way the ocean absorbs rain, completely, without disturbance. When she finished, he asked one question. "Do you want your music back?" Florence almost laughed. It came out as a broken sound. "It doesn't matter what I want. I can't afford a lawyer. I can't afford anything. I clean houses for a living." Minho stood up. He brushed off his suit with 2 precise movements. He looked down at her, still on the pantry floor, and his eyes held something she had not seen in them before. Not pity, something harder than pity, something that looked almost like resolve. "I didn't ask what you could afford," he said. "I asked what you want." He left the pantry. The door clicked shut behind him. Florence sat on the floor for another 10 minutes, staring at the space where he had been sitting. The shelf behind him still had the faint impression of where his shoulders had pressed against it. She whispered to nobody, "I want it back." That evening, Mrs. Cho made a phone call to Beverly Hills. She spoke to Seo Yoon for 11 minutes. She reported what she had observed over the past 2 weeks, the way Minho lingered in rooms when Florence was present, the way he had sat on the pantry floor, the way the air in the house had changed. Seo Yoon listened in silence. When Mrs. Cho finished, Seo Yoon said 3 words. "I am coming." Seo Yoon arrived at the Atherton estate on a Thursday morning in a black Mercedes sedan driven by a personal chauffeur. She wore a cream-colored Chanel suit. Her hair was pinned in a low chignon. Her posture was so perfect it looked architectural. She walked through the front door of her son's home without knocking because Seo Yoon did not knock on doors. Doors opened for her. Florence was vacuuming the second-floor hallway when Mrs. Cho appeared and told her that Minho's mother was downstairs and wanted to meet all current household staff. Florence had never met Seo Yoon. She had heard about her, the way staff always hears about the people who pay the bills. She knew Seo Yoon was powerful. She knew Seo Yoon was particular. She did not know that Seo Yoon was there specifically because of her. The meeting happened in the main sitting room. Florence stood with her hands clasped in front of her, while Seo Yoon sat in a cream armchair and looked at her. Seo Yoon's eyes moved over Florence the way a jeweler examines a stone, not with curiosity but with assessment. She took in Florence's uniform, her posture, her skin, her hair, her hands. She took in everything and assigned it a value, and Florence could feel with absolute clarity that the value Seo Yoon assigned was low. "You are from Detroit," Seo Yoon said. It was not a question. "Yes, ma'am." "And before this position, what did you do?" "I worked various jobs, retail, food service." "And your education?" "I attended community college for 2 years. I did not finish." Seo Yoon nodded. Every answer confirmed something she had already decided. Every answer widened the gap between Florence and the world Seo Yoon occupied. My son runs a very important household, Seo Yoon said. The people who work in it are a reflection of his standards. I trust you understand that. Yes, ma'am. Good. That was the end of the meeting. Polite on the surface, absolutely devastating underneath. Every question had been a measurement. Every measurement had been a reminder. You are the help. Know your place. Florence walked out with her dignity intact. She did not shrink. She did not stammer. She answered honestly and then excused herself to continue her work. Her face was calm. Her hands were steady. This infuriated Seo Yoon more than rudeness ever could. She had wanted Florence to crumble. Florence had refused. That evening, behind the closed door of Minho's office, mother and son had a conversation that was quiet on the surface and violent underneath. Seo Yoon told Minho that she had arranged a formal introduction with Yoona Beek, the daughter of a Korean shipping magnate whose family was based in San Francisco. The Beek family was worth billions. A union between the Yoons and the Beeks would create one of the most powerful Korean business dynasties in America. This is not a suggestion, Minho, Seo Yoon said. This is the next step for our family. Yoona is accomplished. She is appropriate. She is your future. Minho sat behind his desk. His face gave nothing away. I will meet her. He did not refuse. He did not argue. He did not mention Florence. He gave his mother nothing to fight against because Minho understood something most people did not. The best way to deal with a force like Seo Yoon was not to push back. It was to give her so little resistance that she had nothing to grip. Seo Yoon left the estate that evening feeling victorious. She should not have. Because the next morning, without telling Florence, without telling anyone except James, Minho made a phone call to one of the most respected entertainment lawyers in Los Angeles. Her name was Priscilla Navarro. She operated out of a boutique firm in Century City and had a reputation for dismantling fraud cases with surgical precision. Minho told Priscilla everything. The stolen DMOS, Terrence Whitaker, the forged contracts. Priscilla listened, asked 3 clarifying questions, and said she would have a preliminary assessment within 72 hours. Within 48 hours, Priscilla called back. What she found changed everything. Terrence Whitaker had never gotten Florence to sign a rights transfer agreement. He had forged her signature on ownership documents. The forgery was sloppy. A forensic document examiner could verify it in a day, which meant that Florence legally owned every single master recording, every song, every note. Terrence had not just stolen from her, he had committed federal fraud. Minho received this information while sitting in his office. He read Priscilla's preliminary report twice. Then he set it down on his desk and looked out the window at the garden where Florence had confronted him about Craig Whitfield. He did not smile, but something settled behind his eyes, something that looked like the beginning of a plan. 3 days later, Yoona Beek came to the estate for dinner. She arrived in a white Porsche Cayenne. She was 29, tall, immaculately styled, with straight black hair that fell past her shoulders and a face that belonged on the cover of a magazine. She wore a fitted black dress and heels that clicked on the marble foyer like a metronome. She was confident. She was polished. She was exactly the kind of woman Seo Yoon had designed for her son. Florence served them dinner. She set plates in front of them. She poured wine. She moved around the dining table like a ghost, present but invisible, doing her job with the mechanical precision of someone who has learned to function while something inside them is breaking. She watched Yoona touch Minho's arm during conversation. She watched Yoona lean toward him and laugh at something he said. She watched Minho not pull away. Something cracked inside Florence's chest, not loudly, quietly, the way a bone cracks under sustained pressure, not from a single blow but from the weight of something that has been pressing down for too long. She finished serving. She walked back to the kitchen. She stood at the island. The same island she danced around at midnight, the same marble she had pressed her bare feet against, the same room where Minho had said you dance like someone who has lost something. She stood there in silence. She did not dance, she did not hum, she did not sing. For the first time in weeks, the kitchen was completely, horribly silent. The week after Yoona Beek's dinner, Florence became a ghost. She still showed up for every shift. She still cleaned every room. She still performed every task with the same quiet efficiency that had made her one of the best hires Mrs. Cho had ever made. But the warmth was gone. The humming in the hallways was gone. The small moments of light, a laugh shared with the gardener, a compliment to the chef about his kimchi jjigae, the way she used to sing under her breath while folding towels, all of it vanished. The house felt it. The other staff members noticed. Even the gardener, a quiet Mexican-American man named Raphael who rarely commented on household matters, said to Mrs. Cho one morning, "Something is wrong with the girl. The house is too quiet." Min-ho noticed most of all. He stood in the kitchen doorway at midnight. The light was off. The room was empty. No music, no movement, no Florence. He stood there for a long time, looking at cold, dark marble, and the silence pressed against him like a physical weight. 4 days after the dinner, Yuna Beek returned to the estate. She came under the pretense of dropping off a book she had mentioned to Min-ho during their meal. She brought her personal assistant, a nervous young woman who carried Yuna's handbag and stayed 3 steps behind her at all times. Min-ho was in a meeting. Yuna said she would wait. She wandered the house like she already owned it. She found Florence in the second-floor hallway, carrying a stack of fresh linens. "You're Florence, right?" Yuna said. "The maid." Florence stopped. "Yes." Yuna stepped closer. Her personal assistant lingered at the end of the hallway, eyes down. "I want to be very clear with you," Yuna said. Her voice was polite, her eyes were not. "I know what this is. I've seen it before. Staff who think proximity to a man like Min-ho means something. It doesn't." Florence stood very still. The linens were pressed against her chest like a shield. Yuna continued. "Women like you, and I think you know what I mean, are entertainment. Temporary. A curiosity. Men like Min-ho do not build lives with women like you. They build lives with women like me. So I would suggest you focus on your work and stop whatever fantasy you're building in your head before you embarrass yourself." The hallway was silent. Yuna's assistant stared at the floor. Florence looked directly into Yuna Beek's eyes. Her voice was calm and level, without a single tremor. "I clean this man's house. That is my job. Whatever you are afraid of right now says a lot more about you than it says about me." She stepped around Yuna and continued down the hallway with her linens. Yuna stood there, mouth slightly open, watching her go. She had expected tears. She had expected stammering. She had expected submission. She did not get any of it, and the absence of the reaction she wanted unsettled her more than any argument could have. 3 days later, Priscilla Navarro called Min-ho with a full update on the Terrence situation. The investigation was complete. Terrence was in Atlanta, working with a small independent label, actively shopping Florence's stolen DMOS. The forged documents had been confirmed by a forensic examiner. The case was airtight. Priscilla laid out 2 options. They could send a cease and desist immediately and begin legal proceedings. Or Florence could take a more strategic approach. She could re-record her music, re-establish her public presence, and reclaim her identity as an artist. Simultaneously, Priscilla would pursue the fraud case through the courts. This approach was more powerful because it gave Florence the narrative. She was not just a victim taking legal action. She was an artist rising from the ashes, while the person who wronged her faced justice. Min-ho chose to let Florence make the decision. He found her in the East Wing hallway during her evening shift and told her everything. The investigation, the forged signatures, the legal options. He laid it all out with the same precision he used in boardrooms. Florence listened. When he finished, she shook her head. "I can't go back to that. I can't go back to singing and putting myself out there. I'm not strong enough." Something moved across Min-ho's face. Not anger, something deeper. Frustration born from caring about someone who could not see what he saw. "You are the strongest person in this house," he said. "You just don't know it because nobody has told you in a long time." The hallway was silent. The warm light from the wall sconces cast soft shadows across both their faces. They stood close enough that Florence could smell cedar. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "Why do you care about any of this?" Min-ho's jaw tightened. The question sat between them like a live wire. He did not answer. He turned and walked away, his footsteps precise and measured on the hardwood floor, disappearing around the corner. Florence stood alone in the hallway, heart pounding, holding the weight of something she could not name. The next morning, Mrs. Cho found Florence in the staff kitchen during breakfast and delivered the news casually, the way someone drops a bomb while pouring coffee. Mr. Yoon's mother has announced his engagement to Miss Unibeek. It's being reported in Korean business media today. Florence set down her coffee mug. She said nothing. Her face did not change. She finished her breakfast, cleared her dishes, and went to begin her shift. That night, she packed a bag. She wrote a resignation letter on a piece of notebook paper and left it on Mrs. Cho's desk. She set her staff key card on top of it. She planned to be gone before sunrise. The morning air in Atherton was cold and damp with fog as Florence walked down the long gravel driveway of the estate. It was barely 5 in the morning. The sky was gray-purple, not yet committed to daylight. Her bag was slung over one shoulder. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie she had owned since Detroit. She did not look back at the house. She had made it about halfway down the driveway when a black sedan appeared at the gate, turned in, and rolled slowly toward her. The headlights caught her in the fog. The car stopped. The rear window lowered. James looked at her from the back seat. "Get in the car, Florence." "No." He didn't agree to it. Florence stopped walking. The bag slid down her shoulder. "What?" "The engagement. His mother announced it without his knowledge, without his consent. He found out an hour ago. He has been trying to call you." Florence reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen showed 7 missed calls from a number she did not recognize. "Please get in the car," James said. His voice was not commanding. It was tired, like a man who had been woken up at 4 in the morning to prevent something catastrophic. "Let me take you back to the house. If you still want to leave after you hear what happened, I will drive you anywhere you want to go myself." Florence stood in the fog for a long moment, looking at the missed calls on her screen. Then she got in the car. Across town, in his mother's Beverly Hills penthouse, Min-ho was having the most honest conversation of his adult life. He had driven there at 3 in the morning. He had let himself in with his key. He had found Seo-yoon in her sitting room, already awake, already dressed, as if she had been expecting him. Perhaps she had. Seo-yoon was always 3 steps ahead of everyone. It was her greatest strength and her most destructive quality. "You had no right," Min-ho said. "I had every right. I am your mother. I am protecting this family's legacy." "You announced an engagement that does not exist. You told the world I am marrying a woman I have met once. You made a decision about my life without consulting me. Because you would not make it yourself. Because it is not the right decision." Seo-yoon's eyes narrowed. "Is this about the maid?" Min-ho looked at his mother, and for the first time, he did not deflect. He did not redirect. He did not give her the cool, evasive non-answers he had perfected over 32 years. "This is about me," he said. "For the first time in my life, this is about what I want, not what you planned, not what serves the family portfolio, not what looks appropriate in Korean business media. Me." The room was silent. Seo-yoon sat very still in her chair. Her son had never spoken to her like this. Not once, not ever. "You will regret this," she said quietly. "Maybe," Min-ho said, "but it will be my regret, not yours." He stood up. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and said, without turning around, "Retract the announcement by noon, or I will do it myself, and I will make sure everyone knows why." He left. James brought Florence back to the estate. She sat in the kitchen. The same marble, the same room where everything had started and everything had broken and everything now hung suspended in uncertainty. She waited. She did not know what she was waiting for. She just knew she was not ready to leave. Not yet. Min-ho arrived home just after 7 in the morning. He walked into the kitchen. He stopped on the opposite side of the island. They looked at each other across the marble. 2 people separated by money and culture and history and fear, and every logical reason why this should not work. Min-ho spoke first, and what he said was not calculated. It was not strategic. It was not filtered through the disciplined machinery of a man who controlled billion-dollar empires. It was raw. "I watched you dance in this kitchen, and something broke open in me that I have spent my entire life keeping sealed. I have sat across from senators and CEOs, and people who shape the American economy, and none of them have ever made me feel what I felt standing in that doorway watching you dance barefoot on this floor. Florence's eyes were filling with tears. She did not wipe them away. "I don't know how to do this," he continued. "I have never done this. I run an empire built on control, and I do not know how to stand in my own kitchen and tell a woman that she changed everything." Florence's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm terrified." "So am I. I have been used before. I have been discarded before. I cannot survive being someone's secret. I cannot survive being someone's phase." "You won't be. If this is real, it has to be real in daylight, in public, in front of your mother and the world." Minho stepped around the island. He stood in front of her, close enough that she could smell cedar, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes and the truth behind it. "Then let's step into the daylight," he said. Florence looked up at him, and for the first time in almost a year, she felt something she had forgotten existed. Hope. 1 month later, the Atherton estate was a different place. Florence had moved out of the staff quarters and into the main house, not as a maid, not as staff, as Minho's partner. The transition was not smooth. It was awkward and strange and required a complete restructuring of household dynamics. Mrs. Cho was professional about it because Mrs. Cho was professional about everything, but there was a tension beneath the surface that Florence could feel every time they were in the same room. The outside world was louder. Minho had publicly severed any association with the Beek family. The retracted engagement announcement sent shockwaves through Korean business media on the West Coast. People talked, people speculated, people judged. Minho did not care, or if he cared, he did not show it, which amounted to the same thing. Florence's focus was not on the noise. Her focus was on her music. Priscilla Navarro moved fast. The fraud case against Terrence Whitaker was airtight. The forged signatures were confirmed. A cease and desist was served to the small Atlanta label that had been working with him. The label dropped Terrence within 72 hours once they realized they were in possession of stolen intellectual property. Every demo, every recording, every file that Terrence had taken from Florence was now legally frozen. But Florence did not just want her old music back. She wanted to create something new. Minho converted one of the estate's unused rooms on the ground floor, a room that had previously served no purpose beyond storing furniture nobody sat in, into a full professional recording studio. He brought in acoustic engineers from San Francisco. He installed equipment that would make most professional studios jealous. And he brought in a Grammy-nominated producer named Kendrick Torres, who was based in Bellevue and who had produced records for 3 of the biggest R&B artists in the country. Kendrick listened to Florence sing exactly 1 time. She stood in the middle of the unfinished studio, surrounded by boxes of equipment that had not been unpacked yet, and sang an a cappella version of Glass Water, the song Terrence had stolen. Kendrick took off his headphones. He looked at her. He looked at Minho, who was standing in the doorway. "Where have you been hiding?" Kendrick said. Florence smiled. It was the first real smile Minho had seen from her. It changed her entire face. She recorded 3 songs in the first week. They were raw and emotional and autobiographical in a way that made the air in the studio feel heavy. One was about loss. One was about starting over. One was about dancing alone in a kitchen at midnight when the whole world has forgotten your name and you are trying to remember it yourself. She called that one Midnight Kitchen. Kendrick posted a 15-second clip of Florence singing in the studio to his Instagram. No name, no context, no explanation, just her voice, filling the frame, filling the room, filling everything. The clip got 2 million views in 48 hours. The comments exploded. People were desperate to know who she was. Music blogs picked it up. Twitter threads appeared. Someone found her old YouTube channel, and the view counts on her dormant videos started climbing by the thousands. The internet was doing what the internet does when it discovers something real. It was losing its collective mind. Florence watched the numbers climb on her phone and felt something she had not felt in almost a year. Not just hope. Excitement. The kind that buzzes in your chest and makes your hands shake and makes you want to call everyone you have ever known and say, "Do you see this? Do you see what is happening?" She called Rochelle in Detroit. Rochelle cried. Meanwhile, Terrence Whitaker, sitting in a rented apartment in Atlanta watching his entire scheme collapse, made one last desperate play. He sent Florence a series of messages through every platform he could find. He begged her not to press charges. He played the victim. He said the industry was brutal and he had been desperate. He said he believed in her talent and just wanted to help it reach people. He said they could work this out between them. He said he was sorry. Florence read every message. Then she put her phone down. She did not respond, not a single word. Priscilla handled the legal response. The courts would handle the rest. Florence refused to give Terrence Whitaker one more second of her energy, her attention, or her voice. He did not deserve it. Then the storm came from the direction Florence had not expected. Or maybe she had expected it, somewhere deep down, but had hoped it would not come. Seo-yoon. Min-ho's mother, who had been silent for weeks, made her move with the precision of a surgeon. A story appeared in a Korean-American media outlet. It described Florence as a former domestic worker who targeted one of Silicon Valley's most prominent heirs. It painted her as a gold digger who had manipulated her way from the staff quarters into the main house. It included details about her background, her lack of a college degree, her failed music career, and her time as a maid in Min-ho's home. Details that could only have come from someone inside the household. Min-ho read the story on his phone. His face did not change, but his hand tightened around the device until his knuckles went white. He made 2 phone calls. The first was to a media response team that handled crisis communications for his company. The second was to Mrs. Cho. Mrs. Cho answered on the 3rd ring. Min-ho asked one question. Mrs. Cho, to her credit, did not lie. She admitted she had been providing information to Seo-yoon for weeks. She said she had done it out of loyalty to the family. She said she believed she was protecting Min-ho. Min-ho listened. When she finished, he said, "You are no longer welcome in my home. Your final paycheck will be deposited by Friday." He hung up. Mrs. Cho packed her desk within the hour. Florence learned about the article from Kendrick, who had seen it shared on Twitter. She sat in the studio and read it on her phone. Every word. Every lie dressed up as concern. Every detail that had been weaponized to make her look small. She did not cry. She did not rage. She did not call a publicist. She did not issue a statement. She went on Instagram Live. It was her first public appearance in almost a year. No makeup, no ring light, no production. Just Florence sitting in the studio Min-ho had built for her with a microphone in front of her. She did not address the article. She did not mention Seo-yoon. She did not defend herself. She did not explain. She sang. She sang Midnight Kitchen, all 4 minutes and 37 seconds of it. Her voice filled the live stream. It poured through phone speakers and laptop speakers and Bluetooth headphones across the country. 500,000 people watched in real time. The comments moved so fast they were unreadable. When she finished, she looked directly into the camera. Her eyes were clear. Her voice was steady. "I'm back." She ended the stream. The clip was everywhere within an hour. Every music blog, every entertainment page, every corner of the internet that cared about talent and authenticity and the kind of voice that makes you stop whatever you are doing and listen. The Korean-American media outlet quietly took down the hit piece by the end of the day. Nobody asked them to. They did it because the narrative had shifted so completely and so fast that continuing to host the article would have made them look foolish. Seo-yoon, watching from her Beverly Hills penthouse, saw the live stream. She saw 500,000 people fall in love with a woman she had tried to erase. She saw the comments. She saw the tears. She saw what 500,000 strangers saw. She saw a star. 3 months later, Florence stood backstage at a luxury resort in Scottsdale, Arizona, and tried to stop her hands from shaking. She was wearing a simple black dress. Her coils were out and full and framing her face like a crown. Her makeup was minimal. She wore small gold earrings that Min-ho had given her the week before, not diamonds, not anything ostentatious, just simple gold hoops that caught the light. She looked like herself. That was the whole point. Min-ho had told her this was a small private event, a networking gathering for some of his business associates. He said a few people had expressed interest in hearing her sing, and would she consider performing 3 or 4 songs? She said yes because she trusted him, and because she had learned over the past 3 months that Min-ho did not ask for things unless they mattered. She did not know what he had actually done. She walked through the backstage curtain and into the venue, and she stopped breathing. The room held 200 people, not business associates, not casual networkers, music industry executives, A&R representatives from 3 major labels, cultural tastemakers and music journalists she recognized from her years of reading industry blogs and dreaming about a life that had seemed permanently out of reach. Kendrick Torres was there. Priscilla Navarro was there. Rochelle had flown in from Detroit and was sitting in the second row with tears already running down her face. Florence turned to Minho, who was standing beside her in a dark navy suit. "What did you do?" she whispered. He looked at her. His eyes, those steady, unreadable eyes that gave nothing away to anyone, gave everything away to her. "I gave your dream a room," he said. "Now walk into it." Florence walked to the small stage at the front of the room. A single microphone on a stand. A single spotlight, nothing else. No band, no backing track, no production, just her. She sang 4 songs. The first was Glass Water, the song Terrence had stolen, now reclaimed, now hers again, now sung with a power and depth that made the original recording sound like a rough draft. She sang about her mother's cracked hands and night shifts and the way love sounds when it is tired but refuses to stop showing up. The second was a new song about trust, about handing someone the broken pieces of yourself and watching them hold each piece carefully instead of cutting themselves and walking away. The third was an up-tempo track that surprised everyone. It was joyful. It was playful. It made people nod their heads and smile because it reminded them that Florence was not just pain and depth. She was also light. The fourth song was Midnight Kitchen. She sang it a cappella, no microphone. She pushed the mic stand aside and stood in the center of the stage and opened her mouth and filled the room with nothing but her voice. The room was silent. 200 people, not a single sound, not a cough, not a whisper, not the clink of a glass. Just Florence. She sang about a woman who lost everything, who cleaned someone else's house because she could not afford to live in her own dreams anymore, who danced alone at midnight on cold marble floors because her body remembered what her mind was trying to forget, who was found by someone who did not try to fix her or save her or own her, but who simply stood in the doorway and watched and waited until she was ready to be seen. When she finished, the silence held for 3 full seconds, 3 seconds that felt like an hour. Then the room erupted. Standing ovation, not the polite, obligatory kind, the real kind. The kind where people are on their feet before they consciously decide to stand. The kind where hands are clapping and eyes are wet and people are turning to each other saying, "Who is she?" Even though they already know, because Kendrick's clip had been everywhere for months, because the live stream had been everywhere, because Florence Adami was no longer a secret. 3 different labels approached her before she stepped off the stage. A&R executives handed business cards to Priscilla, who collected them with the calm efficiency of a woman who had expected exactly this outcome. Kendrick stood in the back of the room with his arms crossed and a grin on his face that said, "I told you so," to no one in particular. But the moment that no one in that room expected, the moment that would be talked about for months afterward, came from the back of the venue. Seo-yoon was there. Minho had not invited her. She had found out about the event through her own channels because Seo-yoon always found out and she had come on her own. She stood in the very last row, near the exit, as if she wanted to be able to leave without being noticed. She had not left. She had stood there through all 4 songs. She had watched her son's partner, this woman she had tried to diminish and dismiss and erase, hold 200 powerful people in absolute silence with nothing but the sound of her voice. When the ovation ended and the crowd began to move and conversations began to buzz, Seo-yoon walked forward. She moved through the crowd. People parted for her, the same way they parted for her son, because presence like that is inherited. She walked to the front of the room. She stood before Florence. The room gradually fell quiet again. People noticed. People watched. Seo-yoon was silent for a moment. Her face was composed, as always, but her eyes were different. The calculation was gone. Something else had taken its place. Something that looked like it cost her a great deal to feel. "I was wrong about you," Seo-yoon said. Her English was careful, precise, each word chosen with the deliberation of someone speaking in a language that is not their first. "I measured you by things that do not matter. Your background, your work, the things I could see on the surface. I did not look deeper. I did not listen." She paused. The room was completely still. Your talent is extraordinary, Seo-yoon continued, and my son's heart has always been smarter than mine. She bowed, slightly, not deeply, just enough. A gesture of respect that anyone who understood Korean culture would recognize as carrying enormous weight. A mother bowing to the woman her son had chosen. An acknowledgement, an apology, a beginning. Florence looked at Seo-yoon through tears that she did not try to hide. She reached out and took Seo-yoon's hand. She held it with both of hers. Thank you, Florence said. That means more than you know. Seo-yoon squeezed her hand. Then she stepped back, composed herself, and walked to where Min-ho was standing near the side of the room. She did not say anything to her son. She simply stood beside him. He looked at his mother. She looked straight ahead. It was enough. In the weeks that followed, the remaining pieces fell into place like the final notes of a song. Terrence Whitaker pleaded guilty to fraud and forgery charges in a federal court in Michigan. He was ordered to pay full restitution. He was barred from working in the music industry. Every master recording he had stolen was formally and legally restored to Florence Adami's name. Every song, every note, every breath she had poured into a microphone in her Detroit bedroom. Hers. Florence signed with a major label within 2 months of the Scottsdale showcase. The deal was structured exactly the way Priscilla recommended. Florence retained ownership of her masters. She would never again be in a position where someone could take her music from her. That was non-negotiable. The label agreed because they wanted her badly enough to agree to anything. Her debut album was titled Midnight Kitchen. It debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200. The lead single, a re-recorded and reimagined version of Glass Water, was streamed 80 million times in its first month. Music critics called her voice a revelation and the most emotionally authentic debut in a decade. She performed on 2 late-night shows within the first 6 weeks. Both performances went viral. Both times, she wore simple clothes and sang with her eyes closed and her body swaying, exactly the way she had always sung, exactly the way she had danced alone in a kitchen when she believed no one was watching. Min-ho watched both performances from the green room backstage. He did not go on camera. He did not make himself part of the narrative. He stood in the background, arms crossed, watching her do what she was born to do, and he let her shine without casting his shadow across it. That was his gift to her, not the studio, not the lawyer, not the showcase. His gift was stepping back, making space, letting her rise on her own voice under her own name by her own power. On the night the album hit number 4 on the Billboard 200, they were home. The Atherton estate. It was late. The house was quiet. Every light was off. Except the kitchen. Florence stood barefoot on the cold marble tile. Her phone was propped against the spice rack. A slow R&B track was playing. She wore an oversized t-shirt and cotton shorts. Her coils were loose and wild. Her eyes were closed. She was dancing. Not performing. Not rehearsing, not creating content for a camera, just dancing. The way she used to before anyone knew her name. The way she danced when she believed the world had forgotten she existed and the only thing left was the music inside her body. She spun, she swayed. Her fingertips trailed across the marble countertop. She was free. Min-ho stood in the doorway. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. And for the first time, he was not watching with those unreadable eyes that gave nothing away. His face was open, soft, changed. He was smiling. Not a business smile, not the controlled, strategic expression he wore in boardrooms and deal meetings. A real smile. The kind that starts somewhere deep and works its way to the surface because it cannot be contained. Florence opened her eyes. She saw him. She did not scream. She did not stumble. She did not grab her phone and run. She smiled back. She extended her hand. Min-ho looked at it. He looked at her. And the most powerful businessman on the West Coast, a man who controlled boardrooms and billion-dollar portfolios and moved through the world with a precision that left no room for uncertainty, hesitated. Because he did not know how to dance. He had never danced, not once in his entire life. It was not something he did. It was not something he had ever considered doing. Control was his language. Silence was his comfort. Structure was his safety. Florence waited, her hand extended, her eyes steady, patient. He took her hand. She pulled him gently onto the marble tile. He stood stiffly, unsure where to put his hands, unsure how to move, unsure of everything in a way that he had not been unsure of anything in decades. Florence placed his hand on her waist. She rested her hand on his shoulder. She began to sway, slowly, simply, not trying to teach him, just inviting him into the rhythm. He followed, clumsily at first, then less so. His body began to relax. His shoulders dropped. His grip on her waist softened. The music played, low and warm, and they moved together on cold marble in a dark kitchen in one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. No audience, no cameras, no industry executives, no record labels, no media stories, no mothers with agendas, no thieves in Atlanta, no women in white Porsches. Just two people who had found each other in the silence and the music. Two people who should not have worked on paper but worked perfectly in practice. A Korean billionaire who lived inside his own control, and a black woman from Detroit who carried music in her bones. Both of them broken in different ways. Both of them healing in the same kitchen. Minho pulled her closer. Florence rested her forehead against his chest. They swayed. Minho built an empire out of silence and control. He built walls so high and so thick that no one could reach the person behind them. He moved through the world like a man who needed nothing and no one. But it was a woman dancing barefoot in his kitchen at midnight who taught him that some things, the things that matter most, cannot be controlled. They cannot be acquired or negotiated or structured into a deal. They can only be felt. Florence never stopped dancing in that kitchen. Some nights she danced alone. Some nights she danced with him. Some nights she sang while she danced, and her voice echoed off the marble and filled the whole house with something that no amount of money could buy. And Minho never stopped watching, not from the shadows anymore, not from doorways. He stood right beside her, learning how to move, learning how to feel, learning that the most powerful thing he would ever do was not closing a deal or acquiring a company. It was taking her hand and stepping into the music.